Okay, well, hello students. My name is Mrs. King, and as you can see, I've just returned from Ghana and our link with SecTech. And as part of your international food project, I thought it would be really interesting for you to learn a little bit more about African cookery, because it's something that we don't hear a lot about in this country. Certainly Mexican food, Japanese food, Indian food, Chinese food, Thai food, all these foods we eat quite regularly, but we don't really eat an awful lot of African food. And hopefully in this demonstration I'm going to give you this morning, you're going to be able to see a little bit about how Africans cook and a little bit about some of their restrictions and things that make it quite hard for them to actually do the sorts of dishes that we do at home. Right, well, first of all, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the African kitchen. Now, you had a little chance to see a footage earlier about the African kitchen, and you will notice that it's not usually in the home, because most Africans at the moment are cooking still with firewood. So they're making a fire, and they are putting their pots and pans onto fires, and they're cooking that way. So what that means is that most African cooking is based around what we call one-pot cookery. They will have a large pot, and whatever they cook will be done in that one pot over the fire. So I'm going to try as best as I can in school to show you how to cook a very basic stew. A lot of African food is stews cooked in the one pot, and then they will cook a variety of food staples, carbohydrate foods like rice, or a vegetable called a yam, or another vegetable called a cassava, which they look a little bit like a sweet potato, like this, but they're much bigger, and they're very floury and a bit like potatoes, and they eat an awful lot of these with the stews that they cook, and they have a variety of different stews. So what I'm going to show you how to cook today is a very traditional West African dish. It's eaten in Ghana, but it's also eaten in other West African countries, and it's called groundnut stew. And groundnut stew has got an important ingredient in it, which we can get quite easily in the UK, and it's this stuff. Now this stuff you should all be quite familiar with, and you might have it on your toast for breakfast, and we call it peanut butter, but they actually call it groundnut. And groundnuts are grown in Africa quite widely, and they eat them in all sorts of things, but they do pound them up into a paste and actually put them into their stews. And most African kitchens will have one of these, which is an African pounder. And all African cooks will start by doing a lot of pounding. And a lot of the foods they cook, they pound them before they actually cook them. So the groundnuts would go in somewhere like here, and they'd be pounded and pounded and pounded until they get this paste, which is what you see there. Now we just buy it in jars, but it's best to get the unsweetened natural one, which if you want to make this dish. And the first thing to make the dish you would do is you have to obviously decide what meat you're going to use. Now, the most popular meat when I was in Ghana was chicken. They have a lot of chickens that run around free range all around the place. They wake you up very early in the morning. And what happens is, you know, they use a lot of chicken. So the first thing they would do is they'd get their pot by their fire, they'd heat up some oil, and they have an awful lot of oil. They don't have the sort of oil we have here. They have palm oil from the palm trees that they grow. But then they would fry off the chicken. So we're going to put the chicken in, and we just fry it off until it goes golden brown. So it's quite easy for us. I was going to wash my hands because that was actually a high risk food. It's quite easy for us because we've got a cooker that we can control the temperature. If it's too hot, we can turn it down. But in Africa, they've got a fire, so obviously they have to be very skilled at knowing exactly the right temperature of the oil so that they know how to cook it. And if it is obviously too hot, they will need to take their cooking pot off the fire to let it cool down a bit. So you turn the chicken around so it starts to brown. Now, when I was in Ghana and I ate a lot of the stews there, one of the most popular type of protein that they would be eating was fish. And actually an awful lot of stews had fish in them. And they quite often didn't really fillet the fish or chop it up. It was like whole fish were put into the stews and cooked. And a lot of the children wouldn't be bothered about the fish bone, and they were quite used to it. So, as you can see, you know, it's a bit different to us. We tend to have our food a lot more processed, and we have our chicken filleted and things like that. And I actually make a point of keeping the bone on this chicken, because actually that's how they would do it in Africa. They wouldn't remove the bone, they would keep it all on, because they would use all the food and not waste anything. Okay? You stop a minute, you stop. I just need it. You ready?
Ready?
Okay, right. So I've cooked the chicken for about 5 minutes, and it's not cooked all the way through. You can see how much oil I've used, and they do use an awful lot of oil because things stick, because their saucepan sticks. So the food can be quite oily. But you can see it's brown, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out and just leave it by the side where it will stay warm, and I'm going to put it back into the stew a little bit later on. So what would happen now is that oil will come off the fire or the heat, and what they would now do is make a pound. Now most African food starts with a pound, and that's where they get all the flavours and things together. And there are very, very few cookery books for African food, because what happens is the mothers pass down the recipes to their daughters, and then they grow up and pass them down to their daughters. And it tends to be the women who cook, and it's word of mouth. So you go to one village and they might make a ground-up stew with a certain recipe, and you go to another village and it's a completely different recipe, because they have different ways of doing things. So it's very hard to get a definite recipe. So I'm just showing you what I learnt when I was there. Now you get your pounder like that, which is made of wood, and everyone's got them, and some of them are massive, really massive. And the first thing they do is they put in, usually, garlic. So some of these ingredients we're familiar with, but they would use quite a lot. They like their food quite seasoned, quite a lot of spices and things. So what they do is they take the skin off, and they would pop the whole garlic into the pounder. Now I'm going to put 2 cloves of garlic in. But some of them would put a lot more than that in, particularly if they were cooking because they've got large families. They might put 7 or 8 cloves because they're cooking for about 8, 9 people. Then I'm going to put some black pepper. Now they wouldn't buy it like we would in the UK. They'd buy it in the little sort of peppercorns, and they'd pound it up. So put some pepper, quite a lot of pepper. Then they love chilli over there, and they will eat a lot of chilli. Now I've got only put 1 in. But they may put several, I'll be honest, they may put several in. And I did eat some food when I was in Africa where I could have my tongue, I could hardly eat the food, it was so hot. And then they also put more whole chilies in it, so you could actually squeeze the chili juice over it. So it was really, really hot. And then they'd get an onion. They got onions, they grow onions, and they would get their onion and they would put that into their pound as well. So, and the other thing which is quite interesting is that this job might be done by someone, this pounding would be done by somebody like a young girl, 7 or 8-year-old girl, as she'd be helping her mum to cook. And they used to stand over the pound and they would just chop their onion in so it went into the pound. Quite smallish. So you can see what they're going to make is a paste in a minute, which is the main flavouring in the dish. So in goes the onion, like so. And then some of them would add a few more spices, because they do grow spices over there. And I'm adding a little bit of cumin, but they wouldn't add it like this, they'd add it as a seed. So a bit of cumin, and I'm adding a little bit of coriander as well. So I've got some spices in there, okay? And then it's the hard job. You have to use this great big wood pounder, and you pound. And what we're trying to do is turn that mixture from being single ingredients into pounding it all together to make a long ingredient. So I'm going to keep pounding, and obviously you've got a lot of very sort of spicy ingredients which will make your eyes water here. So, you know, but they just did it, and our job would be to stand and pound the ingredients together. And I can smell now the garlic, the onion juice, the chilli, all that is now coming together. And you can see it's beginning to pound together to make a paste.